These were the guys at the Rock that we could not stand coming into our building. Coming up next on Pirate Vibes, Patrick and myself will break down the top villains at the Rock. Let's vibe. Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Pirate Vibes. We've got a burner here today for this one. All the villains at the Rock. So obviously it has to be while Seton Hall played at the Rock. I'm joined by my co-host, Pat Madden from the Big East blog. How are you, Pat? Any good content recently? You writing anything, or am I keeping you busy with the show?
I'll have something coming out. If this episode is coming out the second week of August, I'm going to be doing a list I'm going to be ranking the athletic directors of the Big East. So I'm very curious to see, where people think the various ADs fit in the league, including, Brian Felt, who is, for better or for worse, a guy who has his detractors in the Seton Hall fan base. I personally, to make a tease here, I think he gets a bad rap, but that's probably something which is room for debate. Unfortunately, what happens is that when you're a Big East AD, you get judged based upon mostly how your basketball team does, and people don't see the big picture. I mean, it's easy to say that. Let's say, for example, David Benedict is the best athletic director in the Big East, the athletic director at Connecticut, because they've won 2 men's national championships, and they just won a women's national championship in the last 3 years. So, and I do have him first, but it's easy because when you're judging it on the high profile sports, other things don't get looked at. So I'll be interested to see what type of feedback I get from various fans of various schools regarding that list.
Well, you say Felt gets a bad rep with Seton Hall. Today, it's all about villains. I don't think Brian Felt's a villain, but we're going to talk about villains here. So all the fans that watch us, go through the entire list. Patrick provided a list. I added 1 in here. We're going to go through those 5 and a couple of honorable mentions. We want you to leave a comment below and tell us who is the villain. So these are all the nominees for the villain at the Rock. We're going to start. Patrick nominated this guy, Ryan Kalkbrenner. Obviously, what can we say about Kalkbrenner, right? 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, all Big East, 3 times, Creighton, and he went 4-1 against Seton Hall at the Rock. He averaged nearly 14 points, 6-7 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks. The 2.5 blocks is kind of inflated because he had 7 blocks in that triple overtime game where he had 28 points and 9 rebounds. Size has always been a challenge with Seton Hall. It seems like obviously Kalkbrenner is in the NBA right now. He's got great size. I listed them here, and I'll kind of behind the curtain here. Patrick gave me the nominee, and I kind of listed them how I would see them, from the least villain to the most villain. So Kalkbrenner out of these top 5 is my least villain because, man, he gave everyone a problem. He gave everyone a problem for the better part of his career, and I wouldn't call an All-American a villain. And I know there's a couple other All-Americans on this list, but I don't see him as a villain. And he's Creighton. It's Creighton, man. It's Creighton. Like I love the guys that roll Jays, but I guess the old timer. I just turned 42 2 weeks ago. I guess the old timer in me still doesn't see Creighton as a Big East school all the time. Like I know they're there, but are they a Big East school? I don't know.
Well,
your take on Kalkbrenner. Why did you put him on this list?
Let me tell you why I put Kalkbrenner in this category. I'm looking at one game in particular, and that was the triple overtime game from January of 2024. And Kalkbrenner killed us that afternoon. 28 points. I forgot how many rebounds he had. 9. I think he had like 5 or 6 block shots. He just, I mean, that game in particular, I think that people that's the one game. Obviously people are going to remember the win over Connecticut. That was right before Christmas that season. They're going to remember the win against Marquette, which came in the first week of January. But I think that you're talking about one of the most iconic, maybe the most iconic game ever played at the Rock. And Kalkbrenner was the guy. I mean, Stephen Ashworth played well down the stretch. Alexander made a few plays. Trey Alexander made a good plays, but Kalkbrenner just dominated. And just, I don't know how many of those shots he blocked that Kadari Richmond threw up in that game. So you're talking about, that's why I put Kalkbrenner out there, because you can pin him as the reason why we lost. We lost a game that, frankly, had we won that game, Seton Hall makes the NCAA tournament that year. So you can blame him as the number one of the biggest reasons because of that game, which the really close game we lost, as one of the big reasons why Seton Hall doesn't make the NCAA tournament in 2024.
Yeah, I guess I kind of looked at it a little different, because I'm like, man, he did it against everyone. So, like, it wasn't like he turned out. Like, there's a couple on here that it's like, man, he just tore up Seton Hall, like, more than he did anyone else. And but I do agree with you. If he doesn't have that great game in the triple overtime, Seton Hall probably aren't the NIT champs because they're in the tournament, right? All right, number 2. Let's see if I can keep up with the graphics here. Billy Garrett Jr., he went 1-2. He only had one win. I will say, before I go back here, Kalkbrenner, he was 4-1 at the Rock. So he came in and he beat us all the time, but you could say that is more of a Creighton thing than a Kalkbrenner thing. Billy Garrett, 1-2, the DePaul guard. His dad used to coach for Seton Hall. I don't know where you were going with this, because I think he had a couple good games, and obviously it's DePaul, so like they had one good season out of his years they were there. But I'm thinking you're thinking the 2015 game when DePaul was down by 8 and he kind of led them back. Is that and Seton Hall was ranked, and quick research, they lost 51 straight road loss games in a row up to that point against a ranked team on the road. So I didn't know if that was the game you're going with, but why did you choose Billy Garrett Jr.? Because I see him as a good guy.
The issue, the point I'm making with Garrett is that, you know, when Seton Hall would play, you look at two guys the two big pro stars that DePaul had at the back end of the 20 teens, Paul Reed and Max Struss. Yeah. And I will tell you honestly that, you know, as good as those two guys were, for some reason, the one guy who wore the DePaul uniform, who put fear in the hearts of every Seton Hall fan, was Billy Garrett. And even in the games that Seton Hall beat DePaul, when Garrett was there, Garrett you look at it yourself, he put up 19 points a game in 3 games he played at the Rock. He also played well in a couple of the games that Seton Hall played out at DePaul while Garrett was there. So in that sense, just Garrett was the type of guy who you just sat there and said, if Garrett gets the ball to give DePaul an opportunity to win the game, Garrett's going to do it. So you basically, look, if you ask people, name a player on DePaul in the last 10 years, they're going to start with Paul Reed and they're going to start with Max Struss. But I think Garrett, in terms of how he performed, and particularly how he performed against Seton Hall, is why Garrett deserves a mention as someone who I think Seton Hall fans feared, respected, and thought that if he had a chance to win the game, he probably was going to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree. When I came up with my list, I shared you my list. He wasn't on my list because DePaul's kind of forgotten in my head. You never go through the game and you're like, oh, man, I hate them, as some of these other players are on here. So maybe that's the reason why, but I respect his choice. In my opinion, he's more of a villain than Kalkbrenner because he did show up against Seton Hall a little bit more than every game. Kalkbrenner, All-American, you know what I mean? So we'll go to the next one. This was my pick, Markus Howard. Obviously, he's a great scorer. They went 1-3, which that I found interesting that they went 1-3 against Seton Hall. For some reason, maybe I'm confusing the home and away, but it just seemed like Marquette. I don't know. I just felt like Marquette, but he lit up the scoring, right? In his sophomore year, Marquette was desperate for a win at the time. He comes in, they get 4 losses in a row, and he was 9 from 13, 10 from the field, 10 from 10 on the free throw line, 7 rebounds. That's what kind of was like, bro, like that's the third greatest amount that he ever had was against Seton Hall. It just seemed like he always seemed to have like a big moment against Seton Hall. Obviously, he's an All-American. You can use that argument with Kalkbrenner with me, right? Like he's an All-American. He did this against everyone. But it just seemed like Markus Howard always played Seton Hall tough, especially at the Rock. Your take?
I disagree with Howard. There was a game in the first week of March. Seton Hall was going into the last week of March with 2 home games against ranked Marquette and Villanova teams. Marquette had a chance to clinch the regular season title with a win at the Rock and had a 9-point lead at the half in that game. And this is why Howard doesn't make my list, because Howard ended up only scoring 6 points in that game. And I don't think he scored after halftime of that game, if I remember correct. I was there for that game, and Seton Hall makes the big comeback, wins the game by 10, beats Villanova, and then they find a way to make the tournament as a 10 seed, propelled by those 2 wins. And then Seton Hall, and you're talking about home games, but Seton Hall played Marquette on Howard's senior night. And even though I think Howard ended up with 22 points, a lot of them were in garbage time because Seton Hall had Marquette up by 20 most of that game, and Marquette, brought it back within 9, but it was too late. Their rally came way too late, and they were way too behind. So in that sense, I don't see Howard, and if you look at the stats here, I believe those stats of those 4 games you're pointing out are well below what his career average was by, I think, about 4 or 5 points. So in that sense, most of the time, Howard underperformed in those games. You do mention the game, I think his sophomore year, he put up 37 points.
32, and then he had a 27. But you are right. He disappeared in that game in March. I'll give you on that. I just remember those battles where it's just like, man, when will this guy ever miss? And then I remember him grabbing rebounds because obviously he's someone. I'm like, bro, like what is this? Like this is not what he does. And it just.
I mean, there's no shame in Markus Howard's game, by the way. I will. Markus Howard. I forgot.
We love our undersized guards here at Seton Hall.
Yeah, look, Howard is clearly, I think a lot of people would say Howard is the best player in Marquette history. He's obviously their all-time leading scorer. So in that sense, look, give Markus Howard all the props he gets. And he had that one huge 53-point game against Creighton his sophomore year, or his junior year, I think. But the flip side to that is that his success against Seton Hall was not what you would expect it to be.
Wait, you just said something and threw me off. A trash or treasure. Markus Howard is the greatest player to play at Marquette.
Yes.
Better than Dwayne Wade.
You wanted to say I think his
career-wise, it was longer.
Better than Dwayne Wade. Its name's in college. Now Dwayne Wade obviously goes to the NBA and becomes a multiple time.
I just remember him playing Marquette in March.
Because Howard's 5'10", and and Wade is 6'3", 6'4", but I mean he's the all-time leading scorer. Wade was only there for 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. So I just remember that March run. And he just became.
Oh yeah. Hey, you know what? I might have had Wade first. I did a listing of the all-time Marquette greats 5 years ago. I'll have to take a look at it. I know Howard and Wade were both on that list. I forgot where they were in the particular rankings. But obviously you don't. If you went through a list of 5 guys who have played for Marquette, Howard's going to be on that list.
Fair enough. We'll have to get a Marquette guy one day because they are impossible to find. Josh Hart, the Villanova great. Obviously, what can you not say about Josh Hart? Accolades aplenty, right? National champion, all the awards. He's stat stuffer. Was always getting a key play versus Hall when it felt like it. I agree with you on this. I left him off my list because I was trying to look for obscured, I guess. In 2016, his junior year, he had 15 and 10 in that 1-point win. He's everywhere. It's kind of like what he does in the NBA right now. He just does a little bit of everything, and it's awesome if he's on your team. But at the same time, you hate it when he's on Villanova, right? Like, it's as simple as that. I think this is one of those guys that I agree with you on this. If I had to adjust my list, he probably makes it. Your take on Josh Hart? I know Holy Nova will be watching this, and they love Josh Hart over there. Do you love Josh Hart, or is he a villain?
When he's wearing a Villanova jersey, he was a villain.
Okay.
You got two different. I'm going to go two different points here. One, of course, is a very famous game that I was not at the Prudential Center in January of 2015, when Hart sees Angel Delgado on the floor and kicks him.
Yeah.
So I think, and the refs didn't call it because the refs didn't see him do it. But of course, the 10,000 people that were at the Prudential Center that afternoon saw Hart do it. And I think it's just you can say, all right, it's his competitive nature. On the other hand, it sure makes him look like Christian Laettner, kicking that Kentucky guy in 1992. And then you fast forward to this classic semifinal game in the Big East tournament when Seton Hall, I think, was up by 6 with 3 minutes to go. And I think Hart scored 10 points in the last 5 minutes, and Villanova snuck the win out by 1. So in that sense, Hart was a pest. There's a reason. First of all, there's obviously a reason Josh Hart's been in the NBA now for 7 or 8 years. The guy can shoot from 3. The guy's a good rebounder. The guy can score inside. He's got all of the tools, and he had all the tools when he was at Villanova. So we know that when he's on the other team, you have to take notice of him. I think it's just that play against Delgado is seared in the minds of every Seton Hall fan, particularly the ones who are in the Prudential Center that afternoon.
Yeah. Josh Hart, obviously, a lot of Knick fans are probably watching this right now. He's a guy you'd love to have on your team and a guy to hate to go against. It's simple as that. It's respect.
And I'm sure we could find NBA fans. We could probably find NBA fans who would probably put Hart on their list of villains. Celtic fans, Pacer fans, Detroit Piston fans. People like that are probably, even Sixer fans are probably like, they could probably tell Josh Hart to suck it. Excuse my language. So.
And the final guy, we both agreed on this one, JP Mccury from Xavier. He only went 1-3. I think we both were a little shocked by this, that they only won one game at the Rock. The thing that sticks out to me is that he averaged 14 in his junior season, right? He drops 22 against the Pirates at the Rock. In his senior season, he averages only 12.9. He drops 27, which was his second high on his career at the Rock. It just seemed like he always had a big game against the Pirates. Is that the reason why you chose him? Because he just sticks out in my mind.
I will tell you that if we asked Tim Best, who has done the Hoist the Colors podcast with me, he'd probably have Mccury. He'd probably have Mccury as the one guy who, when he was at Seton Hall, he despised Mccury. He was involved with something called the Sign Mafia. And the Sign Mafia used to choose 1 or 2 players from the opposing team to make a sign about to show, to sort of try to throw the guy off. They historically made a sign because Mccury had an issue between his sophomore and his junior season, where he got caught underage drinking at a bar. And they took a picture of the driver's license that Mccury used and stuck it on a poster to sort of try to throw Mccury off. And then Mccury goes off in that game. It was a Saturday afternoon game. Xavier had just made the rankings that week, and Seton Hall was like one of the last teams out of the rankings. So the winner of that game was going to be ranked, and the loser was just going to continue to fall off. And Mccury goes off for the big game. Xavier won even though Xavier only won by 9 at the final score, they're up by 20 a lot of the way. And Mccury just, again, the good is that he stepped up in the big moments. The bad is that, when Mccury would hit threes or would hit a big basket, he used to like to let you know. Yeah. If you want to talk about guys, and we're going to hit upon one of these other guys, so you want to talk about guys who probably had a WWE mentality when he walked into a big opponent. JP Mccury ranks very high on that list.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, I already said Mccury averaged 10.6 in his career. He drops 22 at the Rock his junior year, 27 his senior year. The thing about it, I don't know if you ever go on Basketball Reference or College Basketball Reference, and they include the nicknames. And I was trying to figure out, a quirky little fact. And most of them don't have nicknames on the College Basketball Reference, but JP Mccury does. And do you know what his nickname is?
What did they say his nickname was?
Dennis the Menace. And that describes him perfectly. If you remember the
Absolutely
the TV show and cartoon. So JP Mccury, my pick, if I only had to choose one, and I'm leaving a comment below, which you should do if you're watching this on the Big East Energy Network, this would be my pick if I only had to choose one out of the Rock era. This is my pick. So yours? Which one would be yours?
Probably be between Hart and Mccury.
Yeah.
Because again, Hart has the incident with Delgado, and he made it. Both of them really had huge games against Seton Hall in big moments. Hart's in the Big East tournament and a couple of those games late in 2016 and 2017. And of course, Mccury probably had maybe one of the biggest games you've seen in a big spot by an opponent at Seton Hall. So, in that sense, I think those would be two of the guys. Those I think were the two guys I probably put as 1 and 2 on the list I sent you.
Honorable mentions. I added one here, McClung. You're going to talk about the two that you added here. Obviously, McClung with the Quincy McKnight incident. He goes up for a hard foul. The game's kind of decided. I think there was like 2-3 minutes left in the game. The game's decided. And McKnight's just sitting there on the floor. It's a hard foul. He's waiting for his teammates to come pick him up. And McClung kind of got that swag and looking over him. Not standing over him, but close enough where it's like, yeah, I got you. And McKnight, I just remember McKnight just pointing at the scoreboard. He just, his reaction was like, I'm not getting it. But McClung is just running his mouth the entire time. And McClung is one of those guys. And I know J.J. Redick gets that hard that Grayson Allen, right? Just one of those guys that you just can't stand. And McClung is one of them for me.
Yeah, no, McClung, just a quick point about McClung is that, part of the reason why I didn't put him on the list is that I can't think of a game when he actually stepped up and played.
He had 20 points that night. They lost.
I was at the Prudential Center that night, and I will tell you, it was a Friday night. Yep. The building was half empty, in part because Georgetown was terrible.
Yep.
Which, unfortunately, they've been more terrible than not in the last 10 years. They were terrible. You mentioned the fact that Seton Hall was probably in control of that game most of the way. Yep. And then what's McClung, regardless of how well he may have played individually in that game, when you're losing by 20 points, you can't act like you're a big shot. We get that you're a great player. We get that, you're going to end up in the slam dunk contest, even though you're a G League player.
R.I.P. slam dunk contest, honestly. R.I.P. slam dunk contest.
Well, be it as it may, you talk about he is the personification of a guy who got a lot of credit for a lot of things that he didn't do, which is, I think, why he annoys people. He probably annoys Georgetown fans to a certain extent, if we're being honest. Of course, then they're mad that he transferred out. I think it was to Texas Tech after his junior season. So in that sense, McClung was always interested in the name in the back before the name in the front. And for whatever reason, he wanted Quincy McKnight was one of the last guys you'd want to pick a fight with, by the way. Because McKnight was not a guy. You want to pick a fight with Sandru Mamukelashvili or Miles Kale, who are two mild-mannered guys. That's fine. But McKnight was a junkyard dog. So, he was obvious. He probably would, if they had actually come to blows, I don't think McClung wins that fight.
Yeah. McClung, I always talk about this. My nephew is going into his senior year, and we talk about, he's getting recruited and everything. We talk about McClung. And if McClung grows, if McClung is 15 years younger, I don't think he gets recruited outside of like a D2, D3. I feel like he got recruited because social media put him out there with his dunks when he's guarding a 5'6" kid. You know what I mean? Like I feel like McClung got the publicity just because of the social media generation.
I mean,
That's
he could shoot the three. I mean, it's not like he didn't have skills. It's that unfortunately, the quick point about McClung is that McClung was more worried about how many points he was scoring, particularly when Georgetown was getting blown out in a lot of games, as they did. And then I think the team in 2020, unfortunately, before that game, Georgetown had lost 5 guys. 5 guys had been kicked off the team for various reasons before that game. So in that sense, Georgetown was playing, empty hand. They managed to win like 6 or 7 Big East games that season. But that Georgetown team couldn't compete because Seton Hall was coming in that game, I think, ranked like in the top 15. So that was no contest. And the game was Seton Hall blew them out early. And then we had the nonsense between McClung and McKnight.
Yeah. Quickly, Malik Hall and J.R. Inman. Your last 2 nominees.
Yeah, Malik Hall, Michigan State guy, who his freshman year, I think Michigan State guy is going to correct me on this. I know a couple of Michigan State fans. I think the guy scored 100 points the whole season. He scores 14 in the Miles Powell game. This was the game that Powell had hurt his ankle the Saturday before, and then he goes off for 37 points. I forgot who the name of the player was on Michigan. Mateen Cleaves was the guy who was supposed to basically have a showdown with Powell that night. Cleaves, of course, was, I think he was also involved. What was
Cleaves
that?
Is,
Not
Cleaves
was 2000. I forgot who the guy was. This is bad that I forgot who the guy was for Michigan State. But Hall was an afterthought. And the reason I put Hall here was that a lot of people remember that game. And Hall, I think, hit a 3 to give Michigan State the lead in like the last minute of that game. That guy was an absolute afterthought, except the one big game he had his freshman season was the game against Seton Hall in the Prudential Center, where Seton Hall was up by 5 with a minute and a half to go, and Michigan State finds a way to win that game. So in that sense, I think that's why I put Hall on this list, sort of as like a one-off guy who went nuts in maybe one of the biggest, again, maybe the biggest non-conference game that's ever been played at the Rock.
And then your final guy, J.R. Inman?
Inman is a Rutgers guy. He played at Rutgers when Seton Hall was in the Big East, and I think it was in 2010 when, Seton Hall, I think, is up by 2 in the closing minutes. Inman, I think, had gone off for 25 in the game. And Inman gets the ball with 5 seconds to go, dribbles the length of the court, pulls up from 25 feet, swish. Everyone's the Seton Hall fans in the building. Now, when Seton Hall would play Rutgers in these Big East games, the building was probably, 60-40 Seton Hall Rutgers. So it's not like there weren't a lot of Rutgers people in the building that afternoon. But, everyone at Seton Hall is like, he didn't beat the clock. Unfortunately, when they looked at I think they looked at the replay and realized that Inman had beaten the clock. Rutgers wins that game. Now, I don't know if it was a game that had a particular impact on that season because Seton Hall didn't have a big season and neither did Rutgers. But I think it's the idea that Inman, if I remember correctly, Inman was a Jersey guy. So Inman took his games against Seton Hall, whether they were at the Rock or whether they were at the Rack, and he took those games personally. And I think a lot of Seton Hall people, you mentioned J.R. Inman, and the ones who remember him from 10, 15 years ago, just remember how much that guy, not only hitting that 3, but the fact that Inman always seemed to have big games against Seton Hall. But I don't put him up there because he never really beat Seton Hall in a big spot, as opposed to guys like Kalkbrenner and guys like Hart. And a couple of the other guys who would beat Seton Hall in big spots. The way that, he never beat Seton Hall in a big spot, unless you consider all of those Seton Hall Rutgers games to be big spots.
Yeah, so I'm looking up his stats real quick. and he had double digits. So he had a bunch of times. 15, 14, 18, 14 against Seton Hall, and he averaged 9.5 points in his career. So obviously, they were higher output when he played against Seton Hall. All right, Patrick, we did it again. We made it through another episode. Maybe your signature will be in the mail by the time the next episode comes out.
We'll see. But people had been talking about there's a Seton Hall chat group on Twitter, and they were talking about some of these classic games just the day that we're recording. We're recording this on the 5th of August. I think it's coming out the second week of August. But in that sense, people were talking about some of these games just as, you had the suggestion, Brian, to talk about the players that Seton Hall fans, love to hate. And I'm sure there are people that you and I missed here who will get mentioned in this list. I know there's a St. Peter's guy who had a huge game against Seton Hall. But again, the point is, St. Peter's beat Seton Hall that day, but Seton Hall stunk the rest of the season. So what's the point if he's having a big game against us?
I'm going to be honest with you, Malik Hall. When you sent that over to me, I was like, "Who's?" I completely forgot about him. Obviously, his career wasn't, famous. And I was looking up, I was like, "Are you talking about this guy?" Like, going down memory lane is always great. And all I realize is that I'm just getting older and older, and the time just keeps going faster and faster.
Well, I mean, I'll just a quick point about Hall, and then we can sort of wrap this up. Michigan State fans will tell you that, that if they're talking about people who have been disappointments, Malik Hall is one of them. Yeah. So it's like, all right, when did Malik Hall do anything really great at Michigan State? And maybe one of the few times they'll mention he did anything great was that Seton Hall game, because everything was building up to that game because both teams were in the top 10 or 15 going into the 2019-20 season. So this was a game. It was a Thursday night, so it was on FS1, but it probably got very big ratings because everyone was looking forward to that matchup.
Just looking at the 2 games before Seton Hall, he had a combined 0 points.
So right, as I said,
it took him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games to tally 17 points after that. So the fact that it took him that long, it's mind blowing, and I completely forgot about him. Honestly, you probably were there, but I completely forgot about him.
Okay, I made a mistake. He got 143 points his freshman season. I thought he had less than 100. I think the point was that he just didn't. He was sort of a non-entity. The guy I'm forgetting, by the way, is Cassius Winston.
Yeah,
that's the guy who, going into that game, everyone came into the season thinking that Seton Hall Michigan State game was going to be Powell versus Winston, and that's what everyone was hyped up on. And if I remember correctly, and I'm going to bring it up in 10 seconds here, in that game against Seton Hall, Winston ended up, I think, with 21 points, but Winston was only 6 for 17 from the field in that game. So Winston did not have a classic Cassius Winston game, as opposed to Powell, who obviously went off for 37 points and might have had, that was probably one of Powell's top 3 games in the Seton Hall uniform. And I think that's people are frustrated that Seton Hall couldn't find a way to win that game.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those games that we had it and we should have won. And if it wasn't for a guy like Malik Hall, Seton Hall wins that game handily.
All right, Patrick, we'll do this again. Well, maybe not villains. Maybe the teams we'd love to see. I don't know. I don't know what the opposite of this episode would be, but
I couldn't stomach doing that episode, Brian. So
yeah, we talk about like MDIG and Monmouth, right? Like the Q games.
You know what? Howard's a perfect example to cycle back to him of a guy who everyone respected, Markus Howard. Yeah. But I could not tell you that I could bring myself to, even looking back at it, and going back and forth with Marquette fans at the time. Look, you have to acknowledge that guy is one of the best players to ever play for Marquette. Leading scorer, maybe one of the best scorers in the Big East in the last 10 years. But for me to, I'll give opponents credit who's credit is due, but I'll never love a guy who's been regularly an opponent of Seton Hall.
Fair enough. All right, stay true, stay blue, and vibe on.